Hello and welcome. It is episode number 34 of the Hilarious Humanitarians Podcast. I am Frances Echeverria, licensed marriage and family therapist.
Hello, guys. I am Deanna Silverman, licensed clinical social worker.
Today, we're going to be talking about families and shame, and this was prompted by a listener suggestion from our Instagram account. If you haven't started following that, you can find it at Humanitarians Podcast, and we have that coming up. We'll share that coming up next. Also going to have a feel-good story for you, a checkup on our self-care and pushing our comfort zones. We do that in an effort to build resiliency, and we challenge you at home to do the same. Trust me, it works. Before we get started, though, we want to ask you shamelessly to please subscribe and rate the podcast, share it with your friends and family. That's how we stay not only feeling good about ourselves, but also up on those lists so we're easier to find for other people that are interested in seeking out mental health type activities and podcasts. So one other thing, this is like the laundry list of technicalities before we get started. This is for informational purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice and is not a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please seek the advice of a physician, mental health professional, or other qualified health provider with any questions you have regarding a medical condition. We always recommend you check out 211 in your area if you dial that from your phone. If you are in the United States, they can connect you to services if needed. And also NAMI is a great resource as well. So Deanna, as we get started, why don't you go ahead and read the message that prompted this?
You know, the message it was just basically somebody who follows us on Instagram reached out to express some kudos, saying she loves the show. And she just asked if we would do an episode on family shaming. That was pretty much it. And I know that we've done an episode before about shame versus guilt, but I don't know, it just kind of struck a chord with me with her specifically requesting family shaming. She didn't go into any kind of detail, no story, no nothing. I don't feel like one was even needed. I don't know, just because I personally have gone through this. I think you have. I know a lot of people have gone through some elements of family shaming, whether you're shaming a family member or family shaming us. It could be stemmed from our childhood. It could be stemmed from our choices in adulthood. So I just thought that this topic would resonate with a lot of people.
And when we're talking about family shame, it's going to be interesting as we navigate through it, because there are certainly very, very significant issues. We covered some a few weeks back when we were talking about, we had Melissa join us who talked about her coming out story and about how for a while there was some tension in the family that was related to her preferences, her sexual preferences. And it goes on all the way on that end of the spectrum to things like divorce and loss. And then, but something sometimes as simple as your physical appearance. I mean, the first thing that comes to my head is we were not allowed to draw on ourselves when we were kids. My dad hated it, and tattoos were forbidden.
Oh, really?
As you can see, if you've looked up anything online, I'm a little bit of a rebel in that department. Oh, it was not allowed. Absolutely not allowed.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that, because I waited until my mom, this sounds so awful.
Did you wait until your mom died to get?
Yeah, I did. I waited till oh God, she must be like staring at me from somewhere in heaven or something. I actually got my first tattoo like 2 days after her funeral. And it wasn't like a screw you, mom. I mean, I was devastated.
No, yeah.
It was more of like, see this little tiny.
The little big heart on your wrist. Okay.
Yeah. So I used to draw this heart on my wrist since I was little, and my best friends, all went to her funeral, and we were all sitting around, and all of them had tattoos, and they were like, why don't we all get the same heart tattooed on our body? So it was more like a bonding thing. But then of course it like opened up the floodgates, and then it was like, okay, sorry, mom.
Now I got apologize later. Yeah.
But still till this day, like well, actually, I'm proud to say my cousin has joined the ranks. Before, I was the only person in my entire family. That's like extended cousins, aunts, uncles, you name it. No one has tattoos in my family. And I still get shamed for it. So I'm really happy that my cousin was like, you know what, Deanna, I'm gonna not have you be all alone in that little shame bubble of yours. And he got a tattoo. I was like, yes, I'm not the only one.
Well, research does show that the only way that you can really dissipate shame is through inclusion and empathy and compassion. So we'll get into that actually, but that makes sense that you had the cousin that did that. I lied about my age and got my first tattoo before I was 18, but I was the first one and they were all hidden. But up until, oh my gosh, within the last year, my dad saw one. It was a few months ago. He goes, oh, when'd you get that one? It was, but he's given up on trying to talk me out of it or tell me it's going to keep me from getting a real job.
Right. Yeah. Same with my dad. I think out of all the people in my family, actually, I think my dad was like kind of put on a front of like, I might kill you if you do that. And then when I did it, he's like, well, obviously I'm not going to kill you, but okay, well, why did you do it? And I was like, because I wanted to. And he's like, all right, well, just get a job. You know, like they're just so afraid, which I get now. Now I'm a parent and I'm like, oh boy.
It's easy. I let my kids draw all over themselves. I don't care as long as they can cover it up for school. And I've told them both that when they want to get a tattoo, I will take them to get their first one. But that's kind of the more surface level stuff that we're talking about. But shame can also come in within families if you have differing religious views, differing political views. I don't even get into politics with my father. Like, nope.
No, same here. Nope. Me and Dad do not have that conversation. Nope.
And it can also come into if you decide to take different routes, let's say in terms of family building or even, you know, things like what occupation, like, are you going to go to school or you're not going to go to school? For some people, going to school is an absolute must. And for others, it's considered elitist. I mean, I've even come across clients who have dealt with that, getting a lot of flack from family members who you would think would be supportive and hold them up for something like an educational goal, but it actually goes against some of the tighter family dynamics at home. So
I just want to ask you a question. I just out of curiosity, was your client female or male?
Female.
Because I was just curious if that's what I assumed you were going to say, right. But I didn't want to make super assumptions. But you know, I don't want to lie here. So I made an assumption that it was so she was female. That's interesting because was the family just like, you're not supposed to get an education, you're just supposed to?
It's the setup is more of a traditional family where they're supposed to be caretaking by the youngest, and then everybody kind of falls in line with getting married and having children. So to do something like go and get an education is veering off that path. Now, I've also been in situations though, where let's say if you have a family that's very, oh gosh, what's the word? I don't want to say blue collar, because that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a certain financial like expectation. Well, okay, so I live in an ag community, and there has been a lot of things that have happened where I've seen that younger generations are going to school and getting educated on things, but that's not necessarily considered a valuable trait in a family business, if that makes sense, because it's about experience and tradition over maybe the more educational approach. But I mean, it could go all kinds of ways.
What was that?
An ag community. Fresno is a Fresno County, Central California is a very big agricultural area.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So there's some pushback sometimes with that, with these changing of kind of passing of the torch, if you will, amongst families, especially amongst family businesses. So
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I can see how there would be pressure for sure to kind of carry on that torch.
Right. Or for instance, I know another thing is, you know, working, if you have families where there's a working parent and maybe it was a situation where, you know, you're supposed to stay home with the kids. I mean, shame creeps in all kinds of ways, but as we are discussing it today, I think it's worth reiterating that shame is about the person. So when people go, well, no, it's important to have shame, I think that they confuse that with guilt. Guilt is I did a bad thing. Shame is I am a bad person.
Right.
And I was totally guilty. I was guilty of this earlier. My kid, oh my gosh, Deanna, let me tell you.
What happened?
Had a meltdown about something. And I was like, you're mean. And then in my head, I'm going, you're shaming him. He's not mean. He's making poor choices. Like, this is the stuff that's in my head though, where, oh God, he actually left me a note. Okay. I told him to go to his room, shut his door. Don't talk to me. He stomped out, left me a note on my bed. And it says, I want a therapist now.
Oh, I shouldn't laugh. I really shouldn't.
He didn't spell therapist right. He's 8.
That's better than I guess that's better than the notes I used to leave my parents. Like, I hate you, I'm running away. And then I would literally, I'd run away, but I would go outside and we had this little, like, it was like a front porch bench thing. And I would like post up right there with like a blanket and a pillow. And that was my version. Like, I would kick myself out of the house. And I would always like, I hate you, you're mean. And I'm gonna, you know what, I actually have a picture of one of the letters. And remember Precious Moments?
Yes.
Precious Moments stationery. So it was like, if anybody's listening that doesn't know what Precious Moments is, just Google Precious Moments. Like, anybody
over the age of 30 knows what Precious Moments is.
So I had stationery, and it was like 2 little Precious Moments dolls, and they were like hugging and like with like hearts, and you could tell that they felt fondly for one another. And I wrote my parents, like, when I was 7, 8 years old, I hate you, you're mean, and I'm running away. And then I like X'd out the Precious Moments people, like, this is not for you. I lasted like maybe 20 minutes, and then I was like, I'm hungry.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Oh, I'm saving this one. In fact, I'm going to frame it and put it in my office.
You should. At work though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, he told me, and he's like, and Mom, it can't be you, because sometimes I have issues with you and I don't want to hurt your feelings and talk about it with you. So I need a separate therapist.
That's great. You know what? I love that. That's great that he is able to identify that though.
It's great, and it's horrible.
Yeah. You're like, you know what? You're a little too self-aware for me, bud.
I need to knock this shit off now. I'm the mom. I'm in charge.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, I like that though.
Well, I mean, it just goes to show though that even when we're trying our best, we can shame people with sometimes out of frustration, sometimes not, because we just don't know it. We just don't know any better. But what we want to do is start with, we have this article. It's called Healing Shame, Understanding How Shame Binds Us and How to Begin to Free Ourselves. It's by Robert D. Caldwell. And he starts out by explaining that shame cannot be remedied. It must be somehow endured, absorbed, minimized, or denied. Shame is so painful, so debilitating that a person develops 1,000 coping strategies, conscious and unconscious, numbing and destructive, to avoid its tortures. And he goes into how family of origin sometimes can be a place where shame breeds. Now, look,
sometimes.
Yeah.
Most of the time. No, I'm kidding. I'm not kidding.
No, you're right. You know, let's be real. Our parents do the best they can, and sometimes that's a shitty job, and sometimes they're trying, but we're all products of some sort of shame and trauma. It's just built into the way humans have treated each other.
I have an example of this.
Okay.
Example. So in terms of family and whether it's intentional or not, because I assure you, the times that when my mom were alive and I would tell her, like, this really hurts my feelings, please stop doing that. And my grandma, who is my mom's mom, my grandma's still alive, and she continues to do this. And when basically they shame, like, are you going to wear that? Or comment on my weight.
Yeah.
Comment on my body. And this has been going on since I was, I don't know, 4, 5. Like, I distinctly remember my brother was really, really small, very skinny growing up. And I'm like, I've always been like a tank. I'm a big girl. I've always been very just strong. Like,
and you're solid. I'm solid too. We're just, look, we're not getting pushed over by a gust of wind.
Like me being at my thinnest was like always like a size 10 or 12, you know, and like that was me being like, whoa, you need to eat something. I'm just a solid bodied person. And
look, by the way, there was a time in society where that was very, very useful when resources were scarce. You and I would have been like, we'd been right up there.
I always make the joke that like in the like I think it's like the Edwardian like era, or like, you know, if you were large woman and super white, like pale skin, you're like royalty. And I was like, fuck you, all of you nowadays, like I am royalty, get out of the way. Like, look at this pale skin and overweightness. Just like living a life of leisure.
See, and I'm the one you want around in a famine because I'm really, really good at converting calories.
But you know, even these jokes that like we're joking, like joking around and laughing. I grew up with a self-deprecating sense of humor. I was always like, I'm going to make fun of myself way before you could possibly.
Well, that's one of these coping strategies.
And that was my coping strategy for sure, because I had major body image issues. Because I could literally think back when I was 5 years old, my brother wanted a hot dog for dinner. All he ate was hot dogs and sundaes for like 7 years of his life. And I was like, fuck yeah, I want a hot dog and a sundae. Who the hell does it when you're 7 years old, you know? And well, actually 7-year-old, like in the early 90s, nowadays people are like super healthy and they're like, I don't eat that crap. I know like 7-year-olds who are like vegans, but
not my youngest.
Yeah, but my mom would like, she wouldn't say, it wasn't necessarily that she would say like, you're overweight. She would give me this look like, you want that? Yeah. And then I ended up feeling massive amounts of shame about what I was eating and how I looked. And it's crazy because when I look back at pictures now, I'm like 34 years old, and I look back pictures of when I was 7, I was totally typical, normal, you know, like nothing. And like, I would have thought that I was like seriously overweight. And it's like having body dysmorphia almost, not having a realistic image of what you actually look like, you know? And it wasn't until I always say like I'm recovering from my childhood. I had a great childhood. My parents loved me, and I was sheltered from a lot of things. And I had this really cool childhood, a lot of fun. But there were some stuff where like bringing it back to like whether it was intentional or not. I know if my mom were alive and I had this conversation with her, she'd be like, I just cared about you and I just wanted you healthy and yada, yada, yada. But she just did not understand the damage she was doing by constantly being critical of my body, even if it was coming from a quote unquote good place. Right. And I know her body image issues comes from my grandma, who's fucking relentless to this day, relentless. Like my grandma will tell me comments about my child who's 1.5. Does she really need that? Because she's getting a little chunky. And I'm not kidding. Like, oh, I went into pure, like maybe people are like, it's your grandma. Will you have some respect?
No, not like, grandma's a bitch. Sorry.
Fucking, yeah, no, seriously. Like I went into fucking rage mode. I looked at her and I was like, let me tell you something. That was your one and only time you get to say that. Because my daughter, when she starts being able to understand what it is you're saying, I can assure you, I will not bring her around you if you're going to shame her the way I was shamed as a kid. Because me and my aunt, my mom's sister, who's still alive, thankfully, and we're very, very close, like she and I to this day have side conversations and self-deprecating jokes about like us trying to fucking survive this body shaming culture that we grew up in within our own nuclear family. It's like, dude, what the? Oh, it's tough.
I became incredibly scared when I found out that I was pregnant with a girl, with my oldest, because of that reason. It was the same kind of thing. I mean, I was one of 6 girls, and my mom, when she was younger, was my mom's passed away over a year ago, but when she was younger, my mom had a smoking body. I also know that my mom took horrible care of herself. And I don't know that it was always healthy in the ways that she was able to maintain that figure. And then it did roll over into the way she parented. She had me and my younger sister, and then I had 4 sisters that are half, but with us, it was very mixed messages. Do you sure you want to have that? Are you going to wear that out? Like, does that look okay?
Yeah.
But then completely modeling the behavior of emotional eating and poor choices. And like, we never did anything active as a family. And then my mom ended up getting sick, and it just really kind of went downhill from there. And my dad, I mean, bless his heart. He's very old school, old country. I mean, can't get fat where my dad's from because you got to hike up mountains all the time. And there's not, like the odds of having a ton of processed food readily available weren't a thing. So there were times where he was incredibly insensitive. I still cringe sometimes, but he's been really good in not making the comments towards my children. But I've mentioned this on the podcast before, that my pregnancy with my oldest, who just turned 10, it marks the last time that I had a purging episode from a pretty extensive bulimia history. But I can't lie. I am like, thank God she's tall and slender. She's tall. But you know what? She has her own body image issues. She doesn't even have any before, but she still has them. And, they're going to creep in. But just that idea of your family of origin and the house that you live in now with your family, whatever that looks like, can be a place of perpetuating that shame or healing that shame. And I think that's important.
And that's exactly what I told my grandma. I was like, I have a daughter, and I just told her, I'm like, I'm sorry, but my daughter is going to have the entire world telling her what she needs to look like, just as I did growing up. I thank my lucky stars that we have daughters that are living in a world where we're seeing role models and bodies, shapes of all sizes in the media. Because when we were growing up, it was like Kate Moss was the person that we all needed to be. I just told my grandma, I'm like, yeah, if you think for 1 second that this is going to be acceptable to me when she needs to deal with the world telling her what she needs to look like, and then where she should feel safe is with her family, and for you to be coming at her like that, oh, you got the wrong one. I'm not going to be the one to do this with.
That's kind of what I love, though, about being a mindful mother, I guess I would say. And this is exactly what you are, is that we're aware of it, and it brings out that mama bear instinct that we would have had for us.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I am like, oh God, just rageful mama bear. Get out of the way. I will protect this child with everything in me. And people will be like, she needs her great grandma. Not if she's criticizing her 1.5-year-old body.
No, she doesn't. One thing I want to bring up too is we tend, obviously, because we're 2 females, to move towards the female end of this. But I also want to bring up on the flip side that this kind of thing happens with young boys too. Now that could be what, their body type looks like, whether or not they're being masculine enough, if they are not tall enough, not big enough, not fast enough, not strong enough. I cringed the other day because my dad's good with my kids when we're hanging out, but my son was being emotional about the dog and something. And my dad was like, that's not how men act. It was like, the kid's emotional about the dog. I understand. And he's being an 8-year-old, but at the same time, the shaming can come in so many different ways, shapes, and forms. And we just have to be aware of it to try and correct behavior in a way that isn't long-term damaging.
Right.
But I wanted to get to this article and kind of do a brief overview of, they break it down into sections, and they call it the shame makers. Now, if you grew up in a family that was neglecting, that's often where you have kids in particular that are just kind of left to their own devices. Their needs aren't met. Maybe there's a roof over their heads and they're not starving. They're not in a drug addicted home or things like that. They could be, but it's just kind of like they're silent, or they don't even exist. They are the individual children. And this particular article talks about how that can be one of the most devastating, because at least there's attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this one, it is really like fading into the background. Now, the example it gives talks about someone who has a very severely depressed mother, for instance, that kind of takes all of the attention. But this could also be, I mean, look, we're working women. There are lots of families where both people in the family, or if there's just one or whatever, people have to work, they have things to do. And sometimes we're checked out because we're on social media or just wrapped up in life. And you can just kind of forget that there's people around.
I wish that weren't the case, but it sure is. It's the reality sometimes.
Yeah, this article goes on to say that passion, risk, and hurt are preferable to neglect, either benign or malicious, because we're born for contact and we grow and thrive in it. So in a neglecting household, all of that is lost, and somehow we interpret that as we are not deserving of it. So in a controlling family, now here's the one where it's like, you know, example, like follow dad's rules. You do not stray. This is how it goes. You speak when spoken to. It's that over the top, blind following of the person in charge, the very authoritarian approach to parenting.
Mm-hmm.
We see these sometimes where people will, I've seen it clinically, where there is no going and having a discussion. Granted, look, my kid was driving me crazy earlier about the therapy thing, but wanting his own therapist at 8. But that's the kind of thing where, you know, you don't even validate the child's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Like put up, shut up, and stand in line type of deal, which is not very validating for somebody realizing they have their own feelings and needs that need to be met.
Right. I feel like it's important for people to understand that, like, you can still be the parent. You're not giving in to like the tantrum, or you're not giving in to your kid being
your kid's not running the household.
Right. Your kid isn't running the household, and your kid still isn't running the household, even if you were to validate their feelings, but also tell them to like take a seat, go in the other room. I understand you're feeling frustrated right now or upset. We're going to talk about this when we cool down. And then you're also modeling in that moment emotional regulation and being able to feel safe to talk about things when everybody's kind of calmed down. And you're validating that they too are upset about something, instead of telling them to basically shut their mouth and go in their room and that's it, kick rocks, kid. Like, we don't want that, you know. And we both understand that sometimes we do want to tell our kids to kick rocks. I want to tell my 1-year-old to kick rocks today. I was like, I am so done with you, kid. Like, I'm just done. That's normal. But at the end of the day, we're still the parent. So it's all about finding that balance.
Yeah, I think that's important to mention, that just because, man, if there was one thing I could have driven into my mom's head, it was that, listen, just validate my feelings. I'm not asking you to even change your behavior, but just recognize it. And so, for instance, with my son, I tell him, it's okay that you're mad. I understand, and it's okay that you're mad. That's validating. Mm-hmm. However, you are not getting the phone to play Fortnite on right now because you've been a jerk. That's establishing the expectation and the punishment. Now, if it's, yeah, I know you're mad. Okay, baby, it's okay. I'm sorry I made you mad. Blah, blah, blah. Here's Fortnite. Then that's different. But you can still validate a feeling. And then I think in that way, it helps build mutual respect. And then sometimes as parents, we get it wrong. And maybe you are willing to negotiate. Mm-hmm. Also, the thing about the controlling families is that the solution for these is to make the exterior look perfect. So from the outside, it's like a well-oiled machine, and inside, it's all crumbling.
Yes.
It never works well.
We've seen that plenty of times, yes.
Now, sometimes what can happen, and you've probably seen this clinically, is if you have somebody who grew up in a controlling family, they go the opposite. They go to a enmeshed family. This is where, I swear, if there is one phrase I could strike from the English language and every language on earth, it's, my kid is my best friend. No, stop it. We are supposed to be parents, and there are supposed to be established roles. And in a enmeshed family can often happen when somebody comes from a family that's really controlling and they go, I don't want to be anything like that, so I'm going to do this. There will be no boundaries. There will be no expectations. There will be no personal space in terms of emotional space, physical space, anything, because we're a family, and that's what families are. And this gets really dangerous.
And I think like also it's important to note that, because I grew up thinking, you know, it's kind of one of those things like the general public can't hear, yeah, everyone can be best friends with their kid, because it's running the risk of people like screwing up and doing it wrong. I know that sounds probably really fucked up in a weird way, but like, I know that it's possible to have a friendship of sorts with your mom. My mom was my best friend, but she did it in a way where I knew not to cross her. She was still mom. She was my best friend in that I went to her for everything, but she raised an independent, strong, capable person who like set out goals, accomplished the goals, got a job, was able to hold a job, paid bills on time, was responsible. I ended up being like the mom of the group, of my friend group. You know what I mean? So like I learned all these things from my parents, but I was still able to feel as though I was very, very close to my mom. So I guess I just felt like I needed to say that just in case people are out there going, what?
So here's where I bring it up. She was your best friend. You were not her best friend.
Great point.
So,
okay.
And that's where I talk about hierarchies, because you know what? I absolutely hope my kids come to me for everything. I hope that they can respect me and take my advice, and that we can have, as they get older, they get more and more independence and do their thing. However, I will not go to my 10-year-old for emotional support because I'm having a fight with their father. I will not go to my 8-year-old to make me feel better because I've had a bad day at work. It does not go both ways.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree with that.
So. But I'm glad you brought that up, because it is ideally, yeah, you know, like I want my kids to come to me forever, appropriately.
You know what? I think I was also bringing that because I know there were people listening right now that
got mad.
And got mad. Totally.
Right. Oh, good save, because I was up on my high horse and you clarified it.
No. Like, because I didn't get mad, but it did, like, I was like, wait, I need to
rubbed you the wrong way.
Yeah. And like, but I know your intention. And so I was like, let's explore this a little further. Mm-hmm. And look, we've explored it. And I completely agree with you completely. Cause now I want to make jokes. And I'm like, wait, my mom didn't think I was her best friend. But like at the end of the day, when I really, really think of it from a clinical standpoint, I'm happy that she didn't think I was her best friend. And honestly, you know what? Here to go, like, I'm not going to air all my deceased mother's dirty laundry, but I'll tell you this much. My mom, one way I know she didn't think I was her best friend is because after her death, I always say, like, you always find out who people really were once they die. Like, secrets come out, people start talking, and I still feel very fondly, and she's tremendously missed every single day. Nothing has changed. Like, the way I view my mom, nothing has changed. However, I learned a lot about my mom once she died, you know, and it took a few years. She's been gone for almost, it'll be next year, it'll be 10 years. It feels like yesterday. But if she felt that I was her best friend, I would have already known all these things. Yeah. And I'm telling you fucking right now, if I had known all these things, it would have changed the course of my entire childhood. She protected me. Right. You know what I mean? She completely protected me from knowing
details you do not need to know.
Knowing certain mistakes she made that, you know, a part of me is like, dude, you could have told me when I was 25.
Or maybe,
but well, no, like, okay, I feel comfortable sharing this. This is kind of funny, actually. I know that my mom was a bit of a wild child when she was a teenager.
Yeah.
And I know that her and my dad, this sounds really weird to know this type of thing, but I know that they had like really passionate, like sexual chemistry. Don't ask me how I fucking knew that.
You heard it growing up?
We're like we're just like a very, like, I could just tell they got along that way.
Okay.
And I swear to God, my mom knew that like I had lost my virginity. It had been like years, and I was like well into my mid-20s. And she still would tell me that she got married and she was a virgin. I was like, Mom, I understand keeping that lie alive if I was still a virgin. But you know that I'm not. I came to you when I decided to take that next step, and we got birth control. Like, I got birth control because you took me to the doctors. And I remember asking my dad, finally I went to him and I was like, Dad, Mom said that you guys were virgins when you got married. This fool like nearly fell over laughing. I was like, well, there's my answer. She lied. So anyway, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I found out a lot of stuff where I was like, God, what the hell?
See, I didn't find out anything new after my mom died, because we were clearly in this enmeshed part. We were a nice mix of some neglect mixed in with her, with enmeshed. And honestly, I mean, I think looking at it back through my history, like my mom's parents died when she was really young. Mm-hmm. And so she was orphaned by the time she was 10, and she just didn't know any better. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. Like, I can't really be mad. She just didn't know any better. And the way that this breaks it down is that, you know, there's this understanding that, you know, family is family and that we're all in this together. Well, what ends up happening is it's very hard to build your sense of individual identity and therefore individual effectiveness and responsibility if it's all one. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the hope is that, I think it's a naive hope, but in these families that we'll share the shame. You know, the shame hurts. No one wants shame. So we'll share it and it'll dissipate. We'll all split it up amongst all of us, but really it doesn't do that.
That's not how it works. Yeah. No. You're just opening up the door for everyone to feel less than and scared. Like it's a feeling of instability in the world, and it really affects our self-esteem. You know, shame does a number on our self-esteem.
Yeah. And if we think about this as, okay, what does that look like? Well, let's say, for instance, a child that's relied upon as being, you know, daddy's little helper or mama's little, you know, mama's little strong man, that type of thing. The wellness of the child depends on the mood of the parent.
Right.
So this is where it's just absolutely beautiful breeding grounds for codependency later in life, because there's a lot of those caretaking attributes that are cultivated. Now you get into the abusive families, and we're talking about how shame is kind of is cultivated in a family, in your family of origin. The abusive ones, that's the most obvious. I mean, this is aggressive, attacking families that can be emotionally abusive, physically abusive, and on the absolute most extreme, sexually abusive. And this absolutely deteriorates a person's self-worth and safety. Mm-hmm. And when you think about it in terms of just absolutely having no control, powerlessness, feeling like they don't have a voice, not understanding, you know, this person loves me, then why are they hurting me? And there's absolutely no good that comes of that. Now, as we mentioned, burdens of shame can include poor self-esteem. Sometimes shame-bound people can become offenders. You know, I have a hard time with this, working with the offending population, is cultivating empathy, knowing that odds are they were probably abused as well. Mm-hmm. On the flip side, it can also make people more susceptible to becoming victims themselves if they were victimized in childhood.
Right.
Shame-bound people can also have difficulty with intimate relationships, depression, having very controlling, rigid, or perfectionistic standards. And clinging to an image is important because you're in a lot of people who come from families that have a really kind of shame-based approach to things, because it's all about making it look like to the outside world that you've got it together.
Mm-hmm. So how, like, I mean, when we're talking about all this, like, I think to myself, like, how do people heal from this, you know? And obviously I'm kind of speaking from a rhetorical position, you know, just, but I think it's important for us to have others understand that, like, it is possible to move
Absolutely.
forward and not let shame hinder us any further than it already may have. It's a part of our history and we have to embrace it, and then we can move past it.
Well, I think listening, I mean, not to give us super extra awesome points, but something like listening to a podcast on shame at least opens your eyes to it. The first step in dealing with any problem is to recognize that there's a problem. And sometimes that is the absolute hardest thing, because another thing that shame-bound people will tend to do is to numb their feelings or just kind of space out. So it's important to just shine a light on it. I love, there's an analogy that Brene Brown uses where she talks about that if you shine a light on the shame, it comes out of the darkness, right? It's like adding, you know, like a petri dish, you put that in the dark in the right kind of circumstances, and whatever's in that petri dish is just going to grow, right? Just explode. That's how shame is. So when you bring it out of the darkness, that's the first step. The next step, as you were talking about, is to learn that it's not your fault.
Mm-hmm.
You know, recognizing, hopefully, as we were going through this stuff, some people started to go, oh, like that explains things. Oh, that's how that works. Now that doesn't mean to like start getting angry and screaming and yelling and going and, you know, raising hell to everybody in the world that's taught you shame or has made you feel shame, but at least to recognize it and to help get some explanation.
Mm-hmm.
The article goes on to explain another way to do it is to replace shame with mature guilt. Like, for instance, maybe there are some things you feel shame for that you really should just feel guilty for. Like, recognize that you didn't know any better at the time, or you made poor choices, and therefore it's appropriate to feel guilt. But shame implies you're a bad person, and that never really instigates any sort of change. But guilt can actually change behaviors. I mean, for instance, maybe you don't really care that, you know, like the idea of, you know, I don't know, I'm going to use theft because it's the only thing on the top of my head. Maybe it's not a big deal to you. Like, oh, if I steal a candy bar, big deal. No one's going to notice. But if you got caught for petty theft, you don't do it. So, you know, you don't want to be held guilty. So you don't do it. That's changing behavior. It might not change your morals and values, but it changes your behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it terrible that I was like, yeah, swipe a candy bar? That was my example.
It worked.
I thought I was going to go to hell when I was a kid. Cause you know, those candy bins that like at the store where you can buy in bulk.
Yes.
I'd legit take a couple yogurt pretzels. And I thought for sure, like there was a period of time where I thought God was going to strike me down for every bad thing I ever even thought about.
Yeah. Who taught you that, by the way? Was that just your own anxiety kind of manifesting messages, or did somebody tell you? I'm just curious because I was the same type of kid. Till this day, I'm the same type of kid. Like, I'll walk out of a store with a metal detector knowing damn well I did not steal a thing, and I am like sweating bullets. Oh God, don't let it go off. Literally every single friggin' time. You're laughing, so I know exactly, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I do remember a period of time where it was over the top, and I think that had to do with some of my anxiety. We were not like raised in a religious setting, and I don't go to church, and I have my own views on spirituality. So it wasn't, I think it was, I just heard bits and pieces, especially growing up around a lot of people that were Catholic, which a lot of good old Catholic guilt. So I think I would hear these things, and I didn't know how to interpret it. And then we never had conversations about it. My family didn't talk about it. So I didn't have a chance to have those conversations about what that really meant. So yeah, I thought I was I thought everybody was going to hell. I had a list of everything everybody did wrong that in my head, and we were all going to hell, and I was scared.
Oh God, that's so scary. That
It is
so
sad.
No.
Now I'm like, I got a fast pass to the front. Where's my throne?
And you're all accepting of it. You're all, I'm good. Don't.
I jokingly say, like, I'm raising my little heathens. Don't get me wrong. They're good kids and they have their own views on things, but they're going to make their own decisions about, their faith and where they want to go with that.
Yeah.
The other thing it mentions in this article as it wraps up is to make new parents. You must learn from experience that you are not unworthy of belonging. And this is creating your own family through clubs, churches, professional society, friends, lovers, your marriages, all of those things to try and find connection, because as we mentioned, shame keeps its strength when it's hidden in the dark. So when you are kind of, you relearn, you have these corrective experiences where you're loved. And I know I have a couple of people in my life that are very, very, very important to that process.
I personally feel that's one of the biggest blessings we can give ourselves is when we find, if it's like we've tried, like for example, I've tried to go to my grandma, I've tried to go to certain family members and open up a line of communication to heal some things and have open conversations to promote or work towards healing, and it just is met with resistance, and it's upsetting. I'm not saying that it's not easy. But I just eventually got to a place where I'm like, well, I tried, gold star for me. And now I have to go find my new family, or my, whoever it is, friends, like, just like this article mentioned, friends, lovers, my husband, whoever it is, where they look at me and I know that they genuinely feel proud of me, that they're rooting me on, that they want the best for me. And the last thing they're going to do is comment about something like, are you sure you're going to wear that? Or doubting what I want to do with my life,
Yeah. I think if there's something that I kindly shove my clients towards, it's that you have to find those people. And I know that is not easy. Where it has been the most beautiful thing, and this is why I have such a soft spot in my heart for teachers, is that I've said this time and time again, my fourth grade teacher was a pivotal changing person. My kids' grandma, so my ex-husband's mom, has been absolutely pivotal in changing kind of my orientation towards that, as having a strong female. The psychiatrist I work for, he is an amazing male figure in a lot of ways for me, older male figure. And then you create this family of friends and things, and it's hard to find, but as you work on it, it happens, because you start to raise your standards, right? You learn not to put up with bullshit. And one of the things that I think is great, and I tell clients often, is, in a therapeutic setting with your therapist, that is a good way to start to build rapport and trust. And then you realize you have those skills. Now it has to be appropriate in that setting. But then from there you realize okay, this is kind of how this goes. I can step outside of that and then go and find it out in the world, right? Because our job as therapists is to just work ourselves out of a job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We don't want you as forever clients.
Yeah.
That should be happening.
Right. I tell my therapist, my clients, I really enjoy our time together, but my hope is that when you're done with me, you will never have to come back. My door is going to be open, but hopefully you don't need me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great place to start if you're talking about trying to heal shame. The other ones you can look up. There's lots of articles and things to Google. We'll share this article online, but there is a great book, and you can actually Google some of his speeches. His name is John Bradshaw, and he is one of the early researchers on shame and trauma within families. And he has a book called Healing the Shame That Binds You. Also, Brene Brown, who, if she started a hippie commune, I would be right there. I'd be like Sergeant at Arms. She's done a lot of work on shame and resiliency. So those are two great resources that I'd like to throw out into the podcast world. So that got some heavy stuff there.
All righty. Deep breath, guys. Deep breath. Shake it out. Shake it out.
We like to wrap up with some self-care strategies. Have you done any, Deanna?
I started journaling again.
Oh, good. Okay.
Jotting thoughts and feelings. Also partially because I'm launching my new website, which I'm going to be doing like, if not daily, weekly blog entries. And so it's just a good practice to kind of get everything out in the open. Yeah, that's been interesting and enlightening. So that's what I've been doing for self-care, at least for this week.
So it's been an interesting couple of weeks is what I can say. And one of the ways that I have forced myself to feel better, and this is going to sound very superficial, but sometimes that's okay. We're fine. It's been like 100 degrees here and I don't want to wear pants. You can understand that.
Oh,
right?
I hate pants.
And
that's
so
one of my trigger words.
So what I've been doing is when I'm going to work, I'm wearing dresses, and I'm like, well, Frances, you have a dress on, you better do your hair. You have your hair done, you better do your makeup. And you know what? You have a closet full of heels and you better wear a pair of heels. And it has forced me to feel better, because I honestly believe, like, if you look better, or if I look like I feel better, I'll feel better. So that's been my thing this week. Because really what I just want to do is put on my stretchy pants and a hoodie and hide from the world on some days. But alas, I'm
I know there's going to be some people out there that think that is shallow. I completely agree with you. It is not very often that I am like doing my hair and makeup, but on those days I can reflect back of like how, like what I did. And I actually ended up like doing more because like I wanted to just leave the house. I felt better. It just helps with the self-esteem and just kind of where we're at on planet Earth as far as I'm concerned. Believe me, I would like it if I had amazing feelings and motivation and whatever it is in just my pajama pants looking like the way I look right now, but it just doesn't happen for me that way. So,
and it's just being honest. Now, I mean, there are some days too where it's, going to be pajamas all day. A couple of weeks ago, I don't know, I didn't even change out of my pajamas all day, which was pretty awesome. But that's just been kind of my thing this week. One thing I'd like to bring up too, I had an interesting conversation with a client. She was telling me about how her daughter was freaking out about a chance to, somebody had approached her about turning in a resume for something. Like they sought her out and she was like, Mom, it's not perfect. I can't do it. And she was worried about this job. And, Mom is telling her like, you can do it, sweetie. It's going to be fine. And even if you don't succeed, you're getting the experience. And I told her, I'm like, oh, so have you been doing those resiliency activities I've been telling you about? She's like, no. So what I suggested, and this is why I say, if you try something new, even once a week, it builds resiliency. And resiliency is important for a couple of reasons. It teaches you that when you suck at something, you're not going to die. It's not going to kill you. You get used to that uncomfortable feeling. The other thing is when we try something that's new and different and outside of our normal, we realize that maybe we have skills we didn't realize we had.
Yeah, I completely. We've talked about this in past episodes about like make a fun free jar. Sometimes people are like, new things cost money and I don't really know where it is. I'm like, just Google free stuff in your area. Google events. We're not talking about like learn a new set of sick ass skills, although that's cool too.
Right.
I just have never been to the local library before. I've never gotten a library card. It could be something so mundane. It might sound mundane. Go do it. Just go do it.
I'm a huge fan of, there's an app called Meetup, and you can put your things you're interested in and it will literally give you something to do every day. Also, when I see things online, people on Instagram or whatever, I'll take a screenshot. Like I found there's a Buddhist temple that's doing a lantern ceremony in July, and I'm like, I'm there.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
So it's about pushing your comfort zone. But anyway, so her assignment after therapy, and she has daughters in their 20s, she's going to start a group text where they're going to talk about the new thing they tried this week.
Oh, I like that.
So
I'm digging it. Tell them to invite me to that group chat.
I know, right? One other thing that I wanted to throw out here was Glennon Doyle Melton is her name. And she is an author that's often tied to Brene Brown and stuff, but she uses an acronym that's AFGO, and the PC version is another freaking growth opportunity. But when I get like frustrated with the way life is going, I'm like, it's another fucking growth opportunity.
I like it. It applies.
So here's our challenge to you to go get your own AFGO. I prefer using the real F word in that. So listener shout outs. We want to say thank you to the lady that gave us the recommendation.
Yeah, thank you. We're not going to say the name because, we're trying to be respectful of people's confidentiality. Who knows? But thank you very much. You know who you are. We love hearing from you guys.
Feel good news story? Yeah.
Well, you brought up your love of teachers, so I'm just going to throw this one in there. There was a New Jersey teacher who left $1 million to a school district in her will, and it will be used for scholarships for special education students. That, I don't know, it made me feel good. I'm super, and you know what also makes me feel good? Thinking shameless self-plug. And then you're doing your shameless self-plug because this is what we do, Yeah. Shameless. There is no shame in our game. When my website launches, there's going to be a section for good news, and I'm going to have like a contact form that people can write in and tell me about good news stories in their area, stuff like good news that maybe happened to them. Nothing like crazy personal, guys, but like good news could be, hey, I volunteered at my local pet adoption center, whatever it is. I'm excited about that because I'm all about the good news. And, the world and the media like to make us believe that everything's going to shit, and it's not.
It's not. And if you want to feel better, you need to consume things that make you feel better, both physically, emotionally, and mentally as well. So what's the website itself?
Oh, it'll be hilarioushumanitarian.com.
Okay, you can look out for that.
I know it's super hard to remember. It's my website. It should be done this week, but it's like building a house. You never really want to get too tied down to a date because then it's like, actually, it's 2 weeks out. So.
Right, absolutely. All right. So as you mentioned, I did get my friend basically held my feet to the fire, and shutupskippy.com amazingly was not taken. So
yes!
So you can find shutupskippy.com. It's in its early stages, but want to have a place for you to go and get involved as well. And I used to write. I used to love writing all the time. So I got away from it in life, but now working on trying to get back to that. So that'll be available. You can also find us, the Humanitarians Podcast, on Instagram. Deanna, the Hilarious Humanitarian herself.
Humanitarian Mom on Instagram if you really want to crack up. All the parents out there with kids that are driving us mad slowly but surely.
Dude, today is the last day of school. Do you know what that means?
Oh no, summer school. No, not summer school. Summer break.
Yeah.
You're all, in 1 second, they're going to summer school though.
Oh God, I wish. Yeah, so my heart's going out to all those parents that as of now are having to deal with their children that are home. But thanks, teachers, for putting up with them most of the time. All right, you can find me, Shut Up Skippy, on Instagram, also on Snapchat, and we will be back next week. Oh, don't forget to rate and subscribe, too. We need that, for real. Thanks.
Yeah. Bye, guys.